Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Amy Noelle, and I am a mindfulness and self-compassion coach. So I see people one-on-one. I teach classes. I work with some corporate leadership teams and high performers to just really utilize these skills to help cultivate the qualities that we need to show up for each moment of our life as best we can.
Well, thank you so much for what you do. And can you tell us a little bit about how you found self-compassion and what it is?
Yes. So I started out like many people having a really difficult time and recognizing that I really needed to do something different. So for me, it was a pretty traumatic divorce. And so many years ago, just found myself, questioning and judging myself and feeling a lot of shame at that, this didn't succeed. And, just there was a lot with that. I was really struggling and to the point where I was having quite a bit of physical manifestations of that stress. I mean, my hair was falling out. I was having chest palpitations, and um, everybody out there was trying to like push medications on me,
Mm,
and so I was just, I'm like, there has to be a better way, right, to manage and to
yeah.
deal with this and to become more resilient. And I found mindfulness-based stress reduction. So MBSR is a course that is kind of the gold standard mindfulness course. And so I took that course, and immediately it was just life changing. It gave me the ability to kind of be with my experience in a
Mm,
new way, and really stay present and kind of hold that. And so I knew immediately I was going to be having to go back to work. I had been a physical therapist prior to my marriage, and so I was going back to work and thought, this is what I want to do. This is really
mm.
where I want to share this with everybody. It was had such a profound effect on me. So I went back to get certified in mindfulness based stress reduction. And that's when I was exposed to mindful self compassion as well. And so I have to say that course and I subsequently went back to get certified in mindful self compassion. But that was like the missing link, right?
Mm,
Because with mindfulness, we're really turning towards our present moment with
mhm.
acceptance and trying to stay present. But what happens when that present moment is really painful and really
Mm,
hard and really challenging, right? So we needed the skill to be in that moment with, and take care of ourselves well as we're kind of navigating these challenges. So self-compassion gives you that tool. Self-compassion is the way that you can, really be with yourself the same way you would with a dear friend who was struggling or, going through a really hard time. So often we're so critical of ourselves, and we're so, it's just we probably wouldn't even talk to our friends or enemies for that matter in the way we talk to ourselves,
Mhm.
that harsh critical judgment. And so learning to kind of meet myself with that same care and compassion I do a friend was, I mean, that just life changing, right? And I use it every day, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily make the situations any easier. I mean, they're still coming at you, right? It's life, we're
Mhm.
human. But now I have the skills to kind of meet those moments. Yeah, and so we can kind of talk about as we go here, like how that
Yeah.
happens. But it was life changing. So I'm so thankful that I found it. Just a wonderful, wonderful practice, and really a superpower. I call it a superpower. It's such a wonderful skill to have, and just way of being. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you found this tool and that you're sharing it with us today. Can you lead us through a small exercise so that the audience can have a better idea of what self compassion looks like?
Absolutely. I think it's so important, especially what I love about mindfulness and self compassion is it's not necessarily just standing up here and telling you, like, oh, this is what the research shows and this is what you
Hmm.
should do. It's really something that we can experience for ourselves. And it's important that we do. So I'd love to kind of just do a guided exercise first,
Okay, let's
just
do
to
it.
give us that awareness of how are we treating ourselves? What how am I showing up for myself in these moments that I'm struggling? All right. So this could be a pen and paper kind
Okay.
of practice if you wanted it to be, or you could just reflect. But
Hmm.
if you're a journaler or you want to write something down, you certainly could reflect and kind of write down. But first, maybe just taking a moment to close your eyes or just soften your gaze and allow yourself to kind of tap into this moment, right? So just feeling your body here, feeling your feet on the floor, just noticing this moment, maybe turning your attention to your breath, taking a couple deeper than normal breaths just to really arrive in this moment. And then when you're ready, I want you to think about a time that you had a dear friend who was struggling in some way. Maybe they had made a mistake, something didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. Um, they were just really struggling. How do you show up for your friend? So, thinking about the words you use, what's the message that you're trying to give to your friend in that moment? Might even think about how that's delivered. What's the tone of your voice, the way you deliver those words? Maybe even some physical gestures or body language that accompany this interaction. How do you feel in your body? How are you using gestures to help your friend? And if you want to take a few moments to jot down anything, if that's coming up for you, you can do that. And then when you're ready, just kind of coming back inward. And this time, I want you to think about sometimes when maybe you were struggling, maybe you made a mistake. Things were not turning out the way you would want them to. You were, having a difficult time. What are the words you say to yourself? What's that message? How are you meeting that moment of feeling inadequate or, making a mistake or struggling? And thinking about the tone too. What's the tone of that message? And any physical gestures, maybe feeling how your body feels in that moment, noticing what's going on in your body or even behaviors. All right, so if you want to jot down anything that's coming up for this one, and then just taking a moment to notice what is the difference there? Are you noticing any patterns of difference? Okay. All right. So Michelle, if you how did that go? What was coming up for you on that one?
Well, those are all really important questions and questions to ask ourselves throughout the day. I think I heard you mention that you ask yourself these questions every day. And I'm also hearing that this could be a very powerful tool in parenting as well.
Yeah, yeah. So like just being able to notice the fact that, hey, I typically most people will be kinder and more
Hmm.
compassionate to others, right? So
Hmm.
that's very normal. If that was the experience during that exercise, you're in good company. The research has shown that 78% of people are
Wow.
much more compassionate to others than they are to
Mm.
themselves. And typically, we are not only just not compassionate, we're harshly critical of ourselves. It might have come up that you felt, that so much judgment. And, we have this inner critic that's just kind of holding us to this standard that, we can't meet, those perfectionists out there, that are just never going to live up to, and so we get this critical voice
Hmm.
usually early on in life. right?
Yeah.
So this critical voice may be the voice of someone in our past. It could be, or a compilation of our parents, our teachers, our coaches, those who have, tried to motivate us through criticism in some way. Or if we, so we have this belief that we need this type of voice, right? Or we
Mhm.
have to believe it, right? And so when you mention like parenting, I really believe that, there are some skills, there are some ways that we can kind of teach self compassion to children. But the best thing that we can do as parents is to model this behavior, right?
Mm.
Is to learn it ourselves and to model it because we will become their critical inner critical voice, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So the way we are responding to them when they're having difficulty, then when they're having challenges is they're going to internalize that
Mm.
voice and that will be their inner critic. So it is, it's best if we can just model this, right?
Mm.
So we want them to see us making mistakes and showing ourselves some kindness for that. We want to show up for their mistakes and let them be, you know, um, learn from their mistakes, opportunities for growth,
Mm.
right? Instead of criticizing, for being human, right? So we want to bring that humanity into the process. So yeah, there are lots of little programs for kids learning self-compassion and, through schools that are great.
Mhm.
But I would say the most important thing is that the adults in their life are modeling this behavior because that is what's going to kind of carry over as their sort of inner voice.
So being the children's teacher as well as their parent,
Yeah.
teaching them
Well,
self-compassion and doing so by modeling that behavior for them.
modeling. Yes, exactly.
What about with just life stressors and failures? And I mean, there's so much stress related to COVID and other current events that are happening in the world. How can self-compassion be a tool through these experiences?
Yeah. Really self-compassion is there for us any moment of
Mm.
suffering, right? So it can be something, that we've done, we've made a mistake, or we didn't get the job we wanted, or, the grade we wanted, or whatever. But it can also be, you know, life. It can be what's going on in the world. It can be this, empathetic distress, especially, caregivers, people in the
Mhm.
healthcare industry. When we're around a lot of suffering, right, we sort of empathetically take that on. And so when we and even, when we can't necessarily do anything about
Mm.
someone else's suffering or the suffering in the world, and there's still such compassion, right, for
Mhm.
that, how do we meet that? We have to include ourselves, right? It gets just too overwhelming to feel all that,
Mhm.
even though, without including ourselves. So self-compassion really gives us the resilience
Mm.
to navigate these challenges in a kinder way so that we now can show up for others in the way we're serving and
Mhm.
kind of, working in our world, um, as our best, right? And with that compassion for others as well. So we just have to be part of the cycle of compassion. We can't leave ourselves out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not giving to ourselves so that we can give to others and so that we can also be present and resilient and have the stamina to keep up.
Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
that old, like put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others, right? We need to, it's our best, same with parenting and children,
Yeah.
right? If we can take care of ourselves and if we can stay calm and if we can, meet our needs in that way, that's being carried over, right? We can now show up better, calmer,
Mhm.
more in control, which will only benefit the people that we're, trying to help and serve.
So, what about when in parenting or in the workplace or just in life, we make a mistake and we do beat ourselves up? Is that
Yeah.
the end of self compassion? Or can we like pick it back up again the next day or the next minute or the next hour?
Absolutely. No, yeah. So the great thing about self compassion is it's there for us unconditionally,
Mm.
right? It doesn't depend on our successes or failures. It doesn't
Okay.
depend on how well we do. That's one of the differences actually between self-compassion and self-esteem,
Mm.
right? So when we think about self-esteem, now there's nothing wrong with self-esteem. Having self-esteem has been shown to have a lot of benefits, having high
Mhm.
self-esteem. The problem comes how we derive our self-esteem. If we're deriving our self-esteem from how well we do, right? Like when we succeed, we have high self-esteem.
Mhm.
Then what happens when we fail at something, right?
Mm.
Then we're like, we don't have all those benefits.
Mhm.
Or if we're in comparison with others, if we have to be above average to have good self-esteem, I mean, that just mathematically doesn't work in the world. We can't
Yeah.
all be above average, right? And so, self-compassion is there for us unconditionally,
Mm.
right? So if self-esteem is this, you know, positive self-regard, self-compassion allows us to have unconditional positive self-regard just because we're human beings
Mm.
and we're worthy of
Mhm.
compassion. Doesn't matter, and it's there, and it's especially there for us when we fail. When
Mm.
we fail, when things are going wrong, we can be with ourselves in this kind way, right?
Yeah.
Which in turn, research has shown, will allow us to try again,
Mm.
admit our mistakes, learn from them, ask for
Mhm.
forgiveness, you know, be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Mm.
and allowing ourselves to kind of be resilient to that. So it's a really powerful and important distinction, right?
Mhm.
It's always there for us. Yeah,
I love the being comfortable being uncomfortable
yeah.
because that gives space for the whole array of emotions,
Mhm.
happiness as well as sadness. And sadness is a part of life.
So
And it can be hard to do that, to be in uncomfortable emotions and to allow them in versus pushing them away.
absolutely. And if you think, wow, if I feel this thing that is essentially a threat to me because I judge it as a negative, I don't want to feel this, right?
Mhm.
It throws us into that sort of fight or flight,
Mm.
because it's threatening, right? And we
Mhm.
try to avoid it at all costs.
Right.
And, when we can know that instead of beating ourselves up for that, we're going to be met with kindness
Mhm.
for having an uncomfortable situation. It's not as scary. It's still uncomfortable, but we
Mhm.
can do some uncomfortable things. It's okay. We can have that,
Mhm.
right? It's part of the process. So there's actually three components to self-compassion. And the first one is just that knowledge that we are suffering in some way, just mindfulness, right? So being mindfulness is essentially just present moment
Mhm.
awareness. So for self-compassion, that mindfulness piece is knowing that we're having a difficult time or we're suffering in some way. It's important that
Mhm.
we know that and notice it when it's happening. And the second piece is common humanity. So exactly what you just said,
Mhm.
you know, emotions are part of our human experience, all of them.
Mhm.
They don't need to be judged as good or bad. Anger can be a really powerful,
Yeah.
good emotion to have, to let you know a
Mhm.
boundary has been crossed. I need to do
Mhm.
something here to protect myself, or,
Mhm.
and that's what we'll kind of call fierce compassion,
Mhm.
And so once we can recognize this common humanity, I'm not alone in this.
Mhm.
This is what human beings feel in this type of situation.
Mhm.
Nothing has gone horribly wrong, you know? So that's that common humanity piece. And then that third piece is just kindness. What can I do? How can I meet myself with kindness in this moment? What do I need to hear right now? Right. So we'll later on do a little practice called the self-compassion break, which just really meets those three components.
Mhm.
And you can do that in a more formal kind of meditation, sitting practice, or just on the fly, right? This is a moment of mindfulness. This is normal. How
Mhm.
can I be kind to myself?
Well, I'm looking forward to that. And I love that it doesn't have to be something formal,
Yeah.
especially when many of us are so busy throughout the day. We could do it while we're dropping the kids off at school or taking the dog on a walk. But I'm wondering, what about starting a movement practice, some type of exercise? It could be hard to get going. Do you have any suggestions on how to utilize self compassion in that type of situation?
Yeah. So in our bodies, we hold our emotion, right? How do we even, if you think about how do we know that we're angry, right? It might be I feel tension in my jaw or my shoulder, you know, like there's a tightness in my chest, or, you know, how do we know we're scared? There's butterflies in our stomach, or, you know, so there is such a connection between our physical body and our emotions. And so it's important that mindfulness piece is learning to tap into our body, because we can start noticing what's going on in our body that gives us some really valuable feedback to let us know what our experience is, right? And the sooner we know that, the sooner we can meet that with some
Yeah.
kindness and compassion, right? So a movement practice is really important, and bringing mindfulness and compassion to our movement practice is also really important, right? So we can notice what's going on in my body. Oh, I'm noticing tension in my shoulders. I'm holding myself tight. Can I bring some care and concern to that part of my body and invite some softening, some
Mm.
relaxation, which in turn, whatever emotion that's kind of causing that, we're sort of finding that, you know, backdoor way of meeting that. So it's not, so maybe we don't have in that moment that wherewithal to say like, oh, okay, I need to take a breath, I need to relax my shoulders, you know, I need to you know, talk myself, you know, talk through all this self-kindness. We can really just notice, okay, well, this is happening. You know, offer some physical compassion to that, like find a way
Mm.
to kind of rest and relax that area of our body, and that impacts our emotions as well. Now, so the way we hold our body, you know, has a big impact on how we're feeling. So we increase by, you know, including mindfulness in our physical practice, we increase this what we call interoceptive awareness, knowing what's
Mm.
going on in our body, knowing, you know, how our body feels. So it's a really important practice, yeah, to have that as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. And you mentioned that self compassion break. Can you lead us through that?
Absolutely. So the self-compassion break, like I said, is one that can be done on the fly very quickly, or in a longer practice. So today I'm going to kind of guide it through a little longer, so we can kind of sit
Okay.
with each of those components in a more formal way. And it's important to remember that you can do this in the moment, right? Maybe you're having a, you know, difficult conversation with somebody and you're just needing to bring some compassion to yourself. This can be done very slyly, you know, inside while it's happening. But also say you forgot, say you didn't, like you mentioned before, sometimes it all goes out the window in a moment, you know, that when things are coming up and we think afterwards, like, oh, that would have been a great time to do the self compassion break. You can do the self compassion break later,
Mm.
regarding, you know, because what we're doing is we're practicing meeting those moments. And so, you know, like today, I'm going to have you call upon a little suffering. When we practice self compassion, we're going to call up a little suffering. It might be something that happened yesterday. And you can kind of bring that back in and meet yourself with
Mm.
compassion now. And that still works. That's still a practice. And eventually, with practice,
Mm.
it's going to be much more accessible for us in that moment. Yeah.
So it's okay if it's hard or we're struggling practicing self compassion, but we could keep practicing
Yeah.
and it will become a little bit easier, maybe, or
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, absolutely. It really is just, I mean, it's setting the intention to just be
Mm.
kinder to yourself, right? And that means be kind to yourself for the fact that it's hard to practice,
Mm.
you know? So we
Yeah.
have, you know, I mean, every moment is an opportunity to practice, and you know,
Mhm.
it's a self-care practice. If you're beating yourself up over the fact that you're not doing your self-compassion practice, then that's not self-compassion, right? So
Yeah.
we have that available to us. And so really the most important thing is just setting the intention to be
Mhm.
more compassionate. So
Okay.
yeah, and you can do that anytime, you know, if you kind of blew it or you didn't remember it, you know, you can offer it later. And it does. Like you said, it's training, it's through neuroplasticity. We know now we're actually changing our brains. We're creating this quality in ourselves.
Mm.
So it will work over time, and that's why they call it a practice. It's something that we just, you know, stay consistent with and allow ourselves to just practice doing it. It does become
Yeah.
easier, more accessible, for
Yeah.
sure.
I like to talk to my clients. If you've been spending the past 50 years thinking one way, it's not just with one practice, all of a sudden those connections dwindle away and new ones form. It's going to take time and effort. in
Yeah,
order to create those new connections.
absolutely.
Mhm.
All right, well, let's do it. Let's do a
Okay, let's do
self-compassion
it.
break. So, okay, once again, closing your eyes or just softening your gaze, kind of turning your attention inward. And again, maybe taking a couple deep breaths just to kind of come into this moment. And then when you're ready, just letting that breath return to a nice natural rhythm. You're going to call to mind something that was a little stressful. As we first start to practice, we don't want to deal with the most traumatic thing going on in life right now. So maybe picking something on a scale of 1 to 10, it's maybe a 3 or 4. Something that's difficult, challenging, that's kind of present for you now or maybe in the recent past. And just calling that to mind. So, visualizing in your mind what happened, what were the circumstances, who was involved, what was said, what happened or what might happen. And seeing if you can, call that up to the point where maybe you're feeling a little discomfort in your body. You're starting to notice that. And then just saying to yourself quietly in your mind, this is a moment of suffering. Some other options might include, wow, this really hurts. This is so hard. Just really validating what's here without judgment. And then next, just remembering that common humanity, maybe offering yourself the phrase, suffering is a part of living. Others have felt this way. I'm not alone. This is what it feels like to suffer in this way. And then finally, maybe placing a hand on your heart, or just holding your own hand, another soothing place, feeling the warmth and the gentle touch, and offering the phrase, how can I be kind to myself right now? What do I need to hear right now? And then just kindly and gently offering yourself those words. And if you're having difficulty coming up with the words, it's sometimes helpful to think about, what if a friend, a loved one had this exact same situation? What would you want to say to your friend? If they could hold just a few of your words in their heart, what would those be? And then see if you can offer yourself the same message. This is a moment of suffering. This is normal. This is part of life. How can I be kind to myself? And then when you're ready, just opening your eyes.
That was really lovely and powerful.
Sort of a new way, right, of being with
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. It can be, it can feel foreign. It can feel
Yeah.
unfamiliar. And yet with practice, we get used to
Mm-hmm.
hearing ourselves, we get used to that message. And sometimes the hardest part is receiving it, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
if we can start offering it, it's like Am I going to allow myself to believe this? Am I going to allow myself to be kind to myself? Right?
Yeah.
Because, like you said, we're breaking a lot of old habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so with practice, and some of our phrases we can tweak as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want them to resonate. We want to feel like they're easily received. So
Mm-hmm.
when as things come up, how can I be kind to myself? Thinking about what would I love for someone to tell me right now? What do I need to hear? And making that be as receivable as possible,
Mm-hmm.
starting out that way. It might not be, oh, you're perfect just as you are, because that can offer a lot of resistance, right? It might just be
Yeah.
like, you know I'm here for you,
Mm.
you know you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be okay. Those kinds of phrases, just
Mm-hmm.
something, it doesn't have to be the biggest affirmation out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like that we're not alone, because
Mhm.
especially on all the different social media sites, lots of times people are presenting their best selves or a small moment in time. So it could be easy to forget that other people struggle as well, because you're seeing
Absolutely.
that perfection.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this
Oh,
guidance and this wisdom. If people want more information, how can they get more information from you or on self compassion?
yeah. So my website is amynoellecoaching.com. So you can reach me there. I love talking about this. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out. I work closely with Dr. Kristen Neff, who actually co-developed the course Mindful Self-Compassion. And they also have a nonprofit called the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion.
Nice.
And that is where you can receive tons of training. There's a teacher directory where you can find teachers in your area that are offering courses. Um, it's probably the one place where you're going to find the most information and opportunities for learning. We also have a Facebook group called the Self-Compassion Discussion Group.
Mm,
It's a closed group, but you can say you want to join and come on in there, and it's
yeah.
just a place to be held in compassion and share the learning of self-compassion.
Great. And I'll include the link below. And also on Mind and Body Pilates, we do have a self compassion Pilates class that people can participate in as well. So it sounds like there's a lot of different resources, and it's finding what's going to be the most meaningful to you.
Yes. And I love that. The Pilates piece, like I wanted to mention too. I was a physical therapist before
Mm-hmm.
I sort of got into this work, and I was certified as a Pilates provider for physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a complement to this practice because it is such an important, I think some of the core values of Pilates is really coming back to the breath, coming back to the core stability, which is so helpful to kind of hold yourself in that grounded place
Yeah.
as we move, right? And as we treat our body with
Mm-hmm.
as much respect and
Mm-hmm.
wisdom that's being kind of shared. We really look into our body's feedback, right? And input and stuff.
Yeah.
So it is a great complement. Yoga, Pilates, they're just fantastic movement practices to really complement your mindfulness and self-compassion practice.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to include the links below so that you mentioned for the additional resources. And thank you so much for being here today.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.